Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Kerschbaumer. I'm Editorial Director for SVG. Good to see you all. So is everybody, are you like in a food coma? Because everyone's a little quiet. Are we okay? So I want to bring up the panelists for our next session. We're going to talk a little bit about cameras and lenses, which obviously are a key element for any production. So I wanted to bring up Mike DesRoches, Bruce Lane, Jim McGowan, and Gordon Tubbs. So I just want to say a quick round of thanks to Karen Hogan and to Rick Price for putting together today's event. And also again to Mike Bonner and the Broncos for pulling this together. I got to know Mike when he was at the Yankees as a longtime season ticket holder. So, but it is nice to be here in a land where the Mannings play. I always like being in a stadium where a Manning plays, even though my Manning is better than this Manning. But
Oy.
Another day. Huh? At throwing interceptions and winning Super Bowls. Yes. So we're here to talk about cameras and lenses. As we know, we heard it today. We saw it with the Jacksonville presentation. They're doing some 8K. We're hearing a lot about 4K. We heard about HD. We even heard that there's still some SD out there. So I think the goal for you gentlemen collectively is to help people in the audience understand if they're doing SD today, how to get to HD. If they're doing HD, how to get to 4K. And if they're doing 4K, why they should even bother thinking about 8K, although there's not really a way to do that yet. So with that said, I wanted to have everybody briefly introduce yourselves. Gordon, please start.
I'm Gordon Tubbs, Vice President for the Broadcast and Communications Group within Fujifilm, or up until 2 or 3 years ago was known as Fujinon. So Fujinon's our brand, but Fujifilm's the company.
Bruce Lane, I'm with Grass Valley. I'm a strategic account manager responsible for sports venues in North America, and work with clients like the Broncos, like Pat Jordan, and just providing the right equipment for them.
Jim McGowan, I'm with the Panasonic Media and Entertainment Group. Our focus is on professional sports, college sports, and also the broadcast television market, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and cover the 13 western states.
Mike DesRoches. DesRoches. And I am French, though.
Huh?
Sales support engineer for Sony and our 4K broadcast development production crew. And my job is to work with people to understand pretty much everything you led into this panel with, and also make sure that they're comfortable with those purchases they made and keep stuff sold.
Apologies, Mike. As someone whose name is mispronounced every time somebody says it, I understand.
Ken's not that hard to pronounce.
Huh? So, Mike, I wanted to start with you, and then we'll work back across. Let's start with the HD marketplace. As far as, I want to have, from a camera perspective, each of you kind of talk about what you think are your hot products from a camera standpoint for the venue market, a little bit about it, and then why you think it is the best one for this venue market. So,
Okay.
So, HD perspective.
So certainly 4K has been something that's talked about a lot, but the reality is that when you have a 4K camera, you're not necessarily always using the 4K components right out of the gate. Certainly you can take advantage of the benefits of oversampling for great HD, the ability to utilize high frame rate HD, which fits into the same infrastructure that you already have the ability to use, so that's always nice. The hot product that we came out with and we announced at NAB was our 4300 series camera. So it's actually a 2/3 inch camera. So Grass came out with a 2/3 inch 4K camera that can do 6 times. We have a camera at the F55. This is a super 35 millimeter camera that can do live. Stadiums like the Eagles and the Cardinals and the Niners have all taken advantage of that on the live gaming and production standpoints. But the 4300 now is a 2/3 inch 4K camera that can do an 8 times high frame rate. And therefore, you're also leveraging the 2/3 inch box lenses that Gordon's company and then Joe in the back, his companies provide from Canon and Fujinon. And just, you know, it's a cost-effective, flexible solution that you can pretty much just operate with the same paint boxes and CCUs that most of the production trucks have already. And so it's pretty much just a plug-and-play environment. That's the 4300. So 4K is immediately usable for production purposes, where you can shoot things, edit it down, crop, stabilize, whatever. In live environments, it's primarily a tool where you can either shoot to a board and then scale up and zoom in, like with the Dreamcatcher solutions, which are used at a number of stations that Joe here with the Evert's tattoos all over his body can attest to. And then you also have the ability to do the high frame rate in HD. And that's really where the big play is for these tool sets, is the high frame rate, because it's plug and play for the venues right now.
Well, Mike, where do you see obviously for the day in, day out HD user, the 2500 is still a very important question. So where do you see that fitting into venue operations, and how do you see the future of the 2500 when you have the 4300 there? How do you see them kind of both playing together in the marketplace?
Sure. So the 2500 is basically what's used in-house here. They have, I believe, 6 or 8 of them. And that's kind of the standard live camera, depending on whether it's a Grass Valley camera at some solutions, but also the 2500 seems to be the staple for HD hard cameras. But where you have like the 4K cameras, like the 4300 or the 55, it's just a matter of putting a base processor unit right in front of those guys, and therefore you have either a much higher frame rate capture capability or the ability to do large format, shallow depth of field shooting stuff to get more of a cinematic look. It's all there for you. And the 2500 is the staple right now. And actually, Grass Valley, you guys in one of your articles mentioned how Nesson actually adopted through Game Creek. They have their 94 truck for the Red Sox. And they have, I think they had 8 2500 series cameras. They just pulled 2 out and put in 2 F55 4K cameras to augment that workflow with the 4K, adding to the HD cameras for that high frame rate application, as well as 4K for zoom in and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's just a plug and play. All you really need to do is add a base processor BPU unit in front of the entire camera chain, and it's just plug and play.
Gotcha. Jim, from the Panasonic perspective, I've seen a lot of, I was at the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, and they're using a lot of Panasonic, the E&G cameras to do a lot of the reporting and news gathering. I know Panasonic's not necessarily big in the hard studio camera market, but the E&G stuff, you guys are right in the thick of it.
Yeah, to talk about HD production for HD scoreboards, it's very important to remember that whatever you see up on that scoreboard is going to be magnified. So you want to start out with good tried and true production techniques, good lighting, and also if you're gathering content from the field, you're going to want to pay attention to that focus assist button on the camera. Focus is extremely important in HD, especially when it's blown up on that HD scoreboard. So as far as a base level of camera for that type of production, I would go with a 2/3 inch native 1080p camera and buy the best possible lens that you can afford. That'll give you a good combination that'll provide the detail that's required for that level of production. Panasonic models that I would recommend in that area would be our AJ PX800, PX5000, and also the VariCam HS, which is a 2/3 inch HD version of the VariCam 35. So each one of those cameras have different levels of production features up and through slow motion recording in the VariCam HS. So that's a good level of camera to start with for HD production on an HD scoreboard.
Bruce, from the Grass Valley perspective?
At NAB, Grass Valley introduced really 2 additional lines of cameras. So we now have the LDX 70, which is available in either 720p or 1080i, but it's not upgradable. So it's our entry-level camera. It's our lowest cost entry-level camera. The 80 line starts at 720p 1080i and is software upgradable to 1080p 60. And then we have the 86 line, which includes our high frame rate in 4K. It starts at 1080p 60 and is software upgradable to switchable between 4K and 6X, or high frame rate, 360 frames per second. So what we've done is we've introduced several lines of cameras, each that are software upgradable. Those software upgrades can be done for a period of 7 days or for a permanent period, so that you can upgrade them for specific events if you need to, or you can upgrade them permanently if you'd like to, if you're going to use it continuously in that mode. And what we've tried to do is work with customers to find what's the right business model for them. Are they starting at 1080i but need the upgrade path to 1080p 60, or do they need to look at 4K or 6X, something like that, and give them the opportunity to upgrade through software when and if appropriate.
Well, you mentioned 1080i, and I was up at the, again, up at the Women's World Cup host broadcast services, which works for FIFA TV, was doing a lot of testing of 1080i, 1080p, and 4K. They were basically mixing and matching. So they're taking 1080p and up converting to 4K, taking 4K down converting to 1080p, taking 1080p down converting to 1080i, and taking 1080i and up converting to 1080p. Trying to see how all this kind of plays together. So let's talk 1080p, 1080i. I mean, do you think that what they've been learning, and we've heard this a lot, is that 1080p productions is where you should be shooting for. You should not be looking at 1080i or 720p. Do you all four of you agree that sort of should be the target for these massive scoreboards now? I mean, is there a big difference between 1080p and 1080i and 720p?
I think the better quality you start out with, the better your production. That content that you're going to keep is, as long as you start out with 1080p, you've got some great content that you can repurpose for other applications later on.
I'd have to agree because our cameras actually capture in 1080p all the time. It's just the output that's licensed for what you're using. So unless we're doing 4K, in that case we're recording 4K. But you know, if you're in 1080i or 720p, we're actually capturing. That's why we don't see any light sensitivity change when you go from 1080i to 1080p or from 720p to 1080i. Stays at the same f-stop.
I'll play the Stephen A. Smith. However, right? So you can certainly shoot 1080p if that's the max of what your camera can do. Some might argue that, all right, if you can shoot 4K, why not shoot 4K, archive 4K, deliver down off of that? Because these boards out here aren't getting any smaller, and therefore, if you start at 1080p, that's as good as you got it, and therefore that's going to scale pretty heavily. And therefore, you may be stuck to, on the board controls, just saying, well, let's do a stitch of these 1080s and get multiples in there to fill these large boards as they're becoming 4K and 8K. I am a huge proponent of shooting in the 4K side because all of us have camera offerings that can do it. The question is, as the audience, if you guys are looking to choose a tool, why would you choose something that's basically not going to be, you know, kind of future-proofed in 2 years? So it's affordable to shoot in 4K right now. And it can be done 4K 60p because there is no 4K, you know, interlaced. So I would argue because it's affordable now, why not shoot in 4K for your acquisition formats unless it's live? Now live in a production truck's a different story. The infrastructure does not fit necessarily to have, you know, 20 some odd cameras in 4K right now. That will come in due time. But depending on the amount of coverage you need, I would venture to say 4K, especially cameras at the very least, to augment your 1080p workflow. But the real key is if you're providing to, say, CBS or an NBC and you need a 1080i output, ideally you're taking a 1080p to work off of. I don't know how many of you guys actually saw the US Open recently, but you noticed that this was Fox's first go at US Open Golf, and it also showed you how good CBS is and their crew and how well they do it because it's well-oiled machine there. Fox had some struggles as much as their technology was good and they were using some new tools and stuff. But they were taking a lot of stock footage from 1080i content and moving to their 720p broadcast, and you could tell every time they were using stock footage because it did not mesh very well. So the more 1080p footage that's there, that's building that stock, the better things will be going forward. So trying to get the scanning types to match would certainly be nice, but I would vote for shooting at 4K because 4K is going to be the SD or the HD of today. Very soon.
You did think the 4300 cameras did very well at the US Open this weekend, though, right? They were using the 4300s, a bunch of them.
So listen to the golfers. They said, yeah, well, the golf course didn't make for really good-looking TV. You know, the golf course looked like crap is the problem. So I don't think there's any camera could have made that look good.
It wasn't much better in person.
Yeah, there was plenty of lipstick on that page.
So I know there are some people in the room who are still SD boards, right? So what's the argument to how do they make the compelling argument when their bosses say, hey, you know what, this board, it's good enough, it works, it's fine. So how do they make the leap from SD to HD?
Who's that question for?
All of you.
I'm talking too much. Go ahead, Bruce.
I would say that, much like Mike was saying, if you can start with the best quality control room, in that case, a high-definition control room, potentially a 4K control room, that's a matter of budget. The benefit that stadiums and arenas have is that it's a closed system, so that you're the control room and you're the big TV set. So you can pick and choose how you want to get to that TV set. At the end of the day, if you have to scale down to SD because that's the budget that you have and you can do the work on your control room, do the work on your control room. Enhance the production, enhance the quality of it. Granted, it's going to suffer at the end of the day because it's going to go onto an SD display, but everything you bring up to that point is going to be better. And to Mike's point also, you're going to have that material recorded in either HD or 4K, and then as you upgrade your scoreboard in the future, when you use that archived material, you're going to start with better material to start with. And certainly that's going to look so much better, especially if we start looking at these scoreboards that are 4K and 8K and different resolutions and different sizes. If we're scaling up SD material, it's going to suffer. It's going to suffer 4 times as bad as HD and 16 times as bad as 4K.
So Gordon, I wanted to obviously work you into this. So Jim mentioned the phrase, getting a great camera and then getting the best lens that you can afford, which that is a big, wide open question, because to me, I look at lens purchases are sort of like a lifelong investment, right? So you tend to ride on with one vendor for year after year. You hopefully are going to replace that lens. Maybe you get 10 to 15 years out of it, as opposed to the usual broadcast cameras, 6-7 years. So
Lenses will, yeah.
yeah. So how do you look at the? You guys have some 4K lenses. So what's the advice? How do you get your management team to be willing to make the investment in a more expensive lens? Because it is a big leap to get to the top in cost, and it can be a difficult discussion to win. So what are your, when you hear people say, how do I get my boss to be willing to pony up for a nice, really good lens, what's the trick?
Well, I'll preface this by saying that lenses are fairly expensive devices, and they can be extremely expensive devices at times. But, so much of what people need, and I say need is because lenses are physics. We need certain focal lengths, you need certain wide angles, you need certain telephoto, according to the size of a stadium, a college stadium, a big pro stadium, an arena. So we have strived, and I think our competition has too, to have a large line of lenses. As a matter of fact, within HD, we have really 2, if you almost count 3, different lines at different price levels, giving you different features and functions. And now we've thrown in 4K as well too. But generally, what we say to people is exactly what was said before by Jim, that you should buy the best lens you can get. There's a good chance the lens is going to outlive 2 cameras. Technology is moving things a little bit faster now. Maybe people will replace lenses a little bit sooner, but generally you should buy the best lens that you can. You should definitely get the focal lengths you want, because that's something you'll never fix. If you don't have what you need in wide angle, you'll never get it. I mean, yeah, you can add on wide converters, but now you've caused yourself a problem somewhere else. So generally what we like to do is really sit down and talk to whoever is involved, whether it's consultant, the systems integrators, the end users themselves, to figure out what focal lengths they really need. We actually have, if you don't know it exists, an app for Android and Apple. It's also on our website as just a web application, which is an optical calculator. It will help anybody figure out what you need, and we can go through that with everybody, what you need in the way of lenses. Past that, what's very, very popular, especially in a lot of the university stadiums, is a 55-to-1 for long shots. It's got the right combination of a wide angle, a 55-to-1 zoom ratio, image stabilization, built-in camera supporter you're not paying for, and it's priced right. So very, very, very popular in stadiums, all the way up through 99-to-1s, not mentioning also the portable lenses. Also, in the last couple of years, because it's been mentioned that a number of stadiums have put F55s in, F5s in, some Arris in a couple of places, we are also a manufacturer of motion picture lenses, what are called PL mount lenses. And there are numbers of those being used. As a matter of fact, most of the original 4K testing that was done by CBS and others, and we'll bow to our friends here at Evertz again, were done with PL mount cine lenses. Not the easiest to use in a stadium, but there are numbers of them out there. Fox used them for a couple of years. CBS did the same. So we've actually been doing 4K, but in a cine application more than a television application for sports. But that also changed at NAB with our introduction of 4K, actual 4K design box and portable lenses, with more to come. We have an 80-to-1 now for box and a 22-to-1 for portable. A lot of demos going on right now. And honestly, I will echo what was said here before. If you're thinking high-end HD. Maybe you should be thinking 4K. And honestly, there's a statement that is going to become our mantra is 4K cameras deserve 4K lenses. You will hear that 2/3 inch is a standard format. The mount B4 is a standard. The electrical interface is a standard. So absolutely, all the good HD lenses that are out there will be used in a lot of applications, especially if there is no budget for lenses. They will move over when new cameras are purchased. But when there is budget for lenses, or later on when lenses do get budgeted, 4K really should be 4K cameras should have 4K lenses. If you do evaluations, you will see differences. As a matter of fact, you'll even see that 4K lenses will make HD cameras look better. It's demonstratable. So that's really the point on lenses.
So as far as the venue market, what I find fascinating is it is a closed microcosm, right, and a closed ecosystem. So, for example, the broadcasters who are struggling with 4K don't have a way to get it to homes and distribute. So it seems as if the 4K market in venues could actually be a better business than the 4K market in the broadcast space just because of that. Do you guys all agree? And
I agree, and actually, I'll jump in. One of the things that, every once in a while you'll come up with a venue opportunity or something like that, and you know that maybe a stadium is still SD boards like you were alluding to earlier. I was kind of partly involved with something recently and this is something that I was scratching my head thinking, if the venue understood that by upgrading the control room to a certain level, they can actually turn that place into a revenue stream by renting out that facility, or at least utilizing the tools that are already there in place that you've paid for, rather than the production company that coming in with their trucks and doing the broadcasts and handling it themselves. We've worked with a number of different customers where, like the Niners at Levi Stadium, they're actually outsourcing their facility and they're renting out the facility and the tools there 300 plus days of the year, and they're actually paying off the equipment they purchased with that. Recently, this venue that has made the move from standard F to something of high definition has chosen to kind of save money, but at the cost, in my opinion, of potentially making money to pay that stuff off a lot quicker, and therefore requiring these other productions to come in and use their own trucks rather than use the control room because it's maybe not a 4K or high enough quality to meet the needs of whatever promotion or events coming in. So when I did this story that I worked with Mike Connor on recently, and one of the things that was mentioned at the last Venue Tech is he had mentioned how we're using this place all the time, and because we spent the money to get the tools in here on 4K level or high frame rate HD, and we have the control boards and the video board itself that's high enough quality to do this at a great level, well, we're able to woo all of these other customers in and turn this into a revenue stream for us. Those that are not thinking that way are really missing the boat. And to do that, you have to kind of think the next level and spend the money to get to the next level. So absolutely, production can happen in the boards. You can produce stuff and put together packages and feed your boards with all these nice tool sets that you have and you guys have seen at facilities like today. But you got to spend the money to do it. But if you spend the money, you can pay that stuff off a whole lot quicker.
what do you think there's the potential, again, we're just going to blue sky this. So next February, there's a big game in Levi Stadium, Super Bowl 50. If they said, hey, we want to do a 4K production of this, that they could potentially use the control room operations there. I mean, they'll be doing the scoreboard there, but let's take, an NBA game, because a lot of guys are like, how am I going to do this production in 4K? And if there's 4K cameras in the venue and a 4K control room, you could just take the output and...
Right. The perfect example is actually WrestleMania. That's exactly what WWE did. They have a whole multi-truck traveling circus that goes 2 to 3 cities a week all over the country pretty much all year. And they went to Santa Clara and did a SAP or whatever that arena where the Sharks play is called now. And then they did, Levi Stadium after that. But instead of actually using all their own equipment, they had gone out and done a bit of a site survey ahead of time and said, hey, we've got all the tools here. We're going to just let them kind of run it. And so they worked in unison with them, but they didn't do all their own tools. They basically leveraged what Levi Stadium had in place because it was already there. And so the Rob Alberinos of the world that get that and say, hey, we're going to basically put this stuff into play so that these other people can come in and use our tool set and we can charge them out for that. That's a massive revenue stream for them. Mm-hmm. And you have to have the vision and also the willingness to spend the money to do that. But they're already I wouldn't say quite in the red yet, or in the black, but they're close.
Right. Well, how do you all see the cost the cost curve of 4K products, changing and evolving over the next few years?
To date, Panasonic really only has one 4K camera that's out there. That's our VariCam 35, and it's kind of a high-end 4K production camera recorder package. And it's got some really cool features, in-camera color grading, a modular design, and the ability to record in actually 4 different codec streams at the same time, simultaneously. So it's a great camera, but it's a production camera. So at NAB, we, in our booth and also in Multidyne's booth, we showed the VariCam 35 with the Multidyne 4K fiber solutions. So it basically takes that camera and turns it into a 4K EFP or studio style camera with all the ability that you would expect from that level of camera shading, the whole works, the ability to use it with the larger 4K box lenses or the Cine servo lenses as well. And then later on this year, that's when Panasonic will really get into 4K camera technology. We'll introduce 2 new models, our UC3000 and UB300. And both of these models are unique. They're large format image 4K and HD cameras. The 3000 is more of a traditional EFP studio style camera. So you'll have a build-up kit, you'll have master setup unit, you'll also have a couple of different choices for remote operating panels depending on the level of shading. And then the UB300 is what we call a multi-purpose camera. So it's more like the Panasonic box cameras that you see in arenas and venues around the country. It'll be that same footprint for use with motor drive lenses and also our high-end level pan-tilt control systems. Also later this year, we'll introduce the AG DVX200. And the DVX200 is going to be kind of a 4K run-and-gun camera. It'll have a 4/3 imager, so you'll be able to do that shallow depth of field, those types of productions. But it'll also have a 13 by Leica Dicomar servo zoom lens on it. So it'll be a very simple camera to operate and almost like a handheld HD camera. So very, very easy to work with, but still do 4K and HD work. And at Infocom, we introduced, it's not available just yet, but the world's first integrated 4K camera. So the pan-tilt zoom camera itself, it's a very small, compact footprint with streaming capability, so that's coming on the horizon. So one camera right now, but we'll have multiple cameras towards the end of the year.
And at Grass Valley, what we've looked at is in cases where you may have a special event that's going to be in 4K. If your budget initially didn't support purchasing everything in 4K, just purchase the camera that's upgradable to 4K. If you're talking about 1080p 60, there's no difference in cost between the one that tops at 1080p 60 and the one that starts at 1080p 60 and goes to 4K or high frame rate, or switchable between the two. And as needed on a event-by-event basis, purchase a 7-day license, and just with a software key, a thumb drive literally, and an email of the license code, upgrade the camera to 4K for that particular production, use it in that production. Oftentimes we've talked to truck manufacturers or truck rental companies and rental houses where they would look at that and make that upgrade part of the billable for the event, so they don't even burden themselves with the cost. They pass that on to their customers, and they get the revenue of being a 4K production for that. And pretty much the rest of the facility, if it's Grass Valley equipment, production switchers, other devices, are already 4K capable. So it's just a matter of upgrading the particular devices that are not licensed for 4K and licensing them for the event.
And it seems like what I'm also hearing from broadcasters, I think would apply here as well, is you don't have to go replace all your cameras and go 4K everywhere. So for example, let's take a football game. There's really like 2 or 3 cameras that will really benefit from 4K. There's up high, the 20 on the 20-yard lines, or the 40. You can, and then you can get by the sideline cameras. Those can still be 1080p for shooting like people like this. You really can't necessarily see that much of a difference from a 1080p to 4K. So that's what they're saying, how to approach the budgeting.
I actually think 4K and high frame rate are 2 different tools that can be used. 4K still has the potential for motion blur if it's not captured fast enough. So depending upon the event that you're covering, you could have motion blur in 4K, whereas in high frame rate, you're capturing faster, and so you don't have the blur. So they're two different tools that can be used, and both support zoom through, in our case, Dyno with Zoom product. There are other replay devices that can zoom as well. So they both support zoom. You pick and choose the tool that's appropriate. 6X might not be fast enough for a golf swing. From talking to Brad Cheney at the golf at Fox covering golf, he said it's got to be 10X or better to really capture a golf swing. So in golf, 4K capturing a beautiful vista and being able to zoom might be the appropriate tool. In hockey, high frame rate might be a better tool to capture a slap shot as it goes into a net. I did some math the other day. The distance between the goal line in hockey and the back of the net has been reduced. At 60 frames per second, the puck can actually go in and out of the net in a frame. So it literally could be captured outside of the net and then captured outside of the net again if you don't capture in something faster than 60 frames per second. So there's a case where high frame rate is probably more important than 4K. They're tools. They're different tools that are available to you. You can pick and choose the one that is appropriate for the type of production that you're doing.
Ken, I just wanted to mention one thing on that UB300 and UC3000 cameras I mentioned. They do have a standard 2/3 inch bayonet mount so that you can use them. If you've made an investment in HD lenses over the past couple of years, you can use those lenses on these new cameras.
And one thing I would mention, if we go back to what Chris said earlier about how, we all need to work together a little bit better as a manufacturer kind of punch. I get it, but one thing I did want to call out though, since Gordon's not getting a whole lot of talk time here, I'll actually bump you up a little bit because when these different 4K cameras came out, we've been shipping 4K cameras for quite a number of years now, but from the gate, Fujinon and Canon have been there. If there's one thing that does work together, it's the camera manufacturers and the lens manufacturers. We are very, very tight. So there's no problems there, especially to the broadcast space. On the photo style lens, that might be a different market, but certainly in the broadcast level, the camera manufacturers, I don't think any of us between Grass Valley and Panasonic, if I can speak for you guys, I don't think we have any qualms with the support that the lens guys are providing. So, everybody that's a customer in here should be pretty happy with that, because I know as a marketing guy and a manufacturer, all I got to do is put in a call to these guys, and we've got glass showing up the next day. So, relative to that, though, on the 4K side, on the Sony space, one thing that is unique about our stuff, we have multiple cameras that can do the production, shoot, cut your stuff, put it to the board as packages, but our lensing allows pretty much everything. They're universal mounts, so you're not fixed with PL or this. You can go to adapt to just about everything, whether it's PL, 2/3 inch. We have our own glass. You can adapt to Nikon glass, to Canon EF lensing, to basically everything. So having that lens flexibility is huge, because if you are a Canon guy or a Fuji guy or a Nikon guy or lady or whatever, you have the ability to take stuff that you already own and leverage it on most of our cameras, which is quite important. And the flexibility is huge.
Well, Gordon, as much as you said the 4K lens and the 4K camera, I'm going to guess that most people are going to make this transition, the 4K camera with an HD lens. But what do you see as, if they have an existing HD lens and they tie it to a 4K camera, what are some of the imaging compromise that they're having in that situation? And then, because I know the 4K camera, the lenses are also developing every day, and next NAB there'll be much more. So what will be the difference then as far as the 4K?
The difference that you're going to see, and again, it does work beautifully. Again, older lenses will work on the 4K cameras. They, even with adapters, as Mike said, will work on even PL mount. We can put 2/3 inch lenses onto PL mount cameras, and that's done all the time too. But really what you're going to see, and we've done a lot of testing and we've done a lot of demoing, and is in the center, any good HD lens probably is 4K. However, as you start moving out towards the second zone and then out to the corners of your images, not only is your resolution going to drop off, but what's really going to not be seen anymore is the MTF. The 4K lenses are designed to be not only high resolution center to edge, but they're designed to be extremely high MTF center to edge. That's giving you real good contrast. It's giving you high dynamic range. Honestly, I recently had a chance to see some 8K footage that came out of Vancouver, and I wasn't very impressed, but it was more because the projector that they were using didn't, it showed you the resolution, but what it didn't show you was the high dynamic range and the contrast. And that's what made the image look not what it should have looked like. So honestly, an HD lens will work great on a 4K camera, but what's going to make that image pop, what's going to make people really, say, wow, is going to be what the 4K lenses can do and outside of the center of the image with MTF and with contrast. That's really what you're paying for. And honestly, yes, it's expensive. It's a long-term investment. Lenses should be looked at as an investment. In the motion picture world, by the way, there's a huge market for people buying lenses and renting cameras, because the lens to them is an investment. The camera is something that they may change even movie to movie or commercial to commercial. The lens, however, moves between them and is an investment. I think it should be looked at this way, too, with 4K.
So in general, I must admit, at NAB this year, I felt that more than ever, this industry, as far as cameras and lenses and just the ability to acquire content in almost any way you want it, and resolution is just going through the roof, and the dynamic range and the color gamut, we're just on the cusp of, I think, a real true, I don't want to say golden age, but a golden age of imaging, where really you can almost deliver the most lifelike experience. I mean, what's your take as far as just in general where this market segment is going over the next couple of years? And what's your challenge as far as the GoPros and some of the lower cost cameras who are out there?
Well, I think a GoPro is just another tool in the box, so it's used for certain applications, and everything is obviously heading towards 4K and 4K PL mount lenses. That's where we'll probably end up over the next couple of years. But it's just all about having the right tool for the right job. You'll see different ranges of cameras, different levels being used for different applications.
We're happy where things are going because the manufacturer that develops about 90% of the imagers sensors in the world, we're doing pretty okay in the sensor side. Every iPhone 6 is a $20 check in our bank every time that one of those is sold, and Nikon uses all of our sensors and stuff, and so we're in good place there. I think where the exciting part is that you can now go and get a really high quality 4K set at home, and you can stream 4K to that set over an OTT network with a very low cost subscription. And that's more of a dedicated kind of pipe that you get. So live broadcast not anytime soon, but producible content that you can feed in high quality to these boards and provide great stuff to fight the battle that a Mike Bonner has, where I really want to we kind of work with the networks and we kind of work with the teams, but we really want to make sure that we're bringing it home and getting the people to come through the turnstiles, not just through the turnstiles and sitting in the game, but they're also interacting socially and then going home and talking to their friends about it, and then they want to keep coming back. And that's the real bread and butter for these guys. And you can absolutely do that today with very affordable 4K cameras. It's here. It's totally available. The only area that's kind of lagging behind is in live broadcast. And the area, by doing that, is go through these different tools we've talked about today and shoot to protect at a higher quality that you can archive and use later on, but then deliver down to what your infrastructure will support as of today. Of course, using high quality glass.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're going to wrap up and take a break. So if there's any questions, I invite Joe. Yes. Hold on, Joe. We got to get it recorded.
118 cameras up in Chambers Bay. That's a lot of cameras. So my question to you is, we all know that's the first IP truck. So my question to you guys real quick is, when are we going to see a real IP camera? Because that's what we need. That's the missing component.
You're not going to develop one of those, Joe?
Technology is definitely making its way into the cameras, and all of the new cameras from Panasonic all have LAN connections on them. Our newer pan-tilt cameras are all IP control and streaming capability, so it's definitely taken off. On the broadcast side, we just introduced our P2 Cast, which is an ENG wireless-based workflow for 4G LTE or Wi-Fi, so it's definitely heading in that direction.
As far as Grass Valley is concerned, I think our security guards kept you out of our booth, Joe. So that's it. Sorry you didn't get to see our IP connection on the LDK XEU base station, but the XEU base station showed at NAB, SMPTE 2022-6 interface, and we also showed, and this is to Chris's point, we showed 4K going over one wire. We did that with TICO compression, and this is where Chris is concerned about different manufacturers having different compression standards, and I know that TICO has an alliance of manufacturers. Actually, I think you're part of the TICO compression. So there's a number of us that are in the TICO compression alliance and are looking at that, and that's a 4-to-1 compression. So you can take what is effectively 12 gigabits of data, compress it down to 3 gigabits of data, and then pass that through the SMPTE 2022. And we showed that at NAB between our dyno replay, our routing switcher, and our camera, and our production switcher, all managing 4K over one wire with TICO compression. So at NAB it was shown.
And going back 3 years ago, we actually came out with a SDI in and an IP out IP55 system 3 years ago, and things have just evolved from there. So we'll have something very soon, but it's not just the cameras, of course. There's a whole infrastructure else that has to be dealt with. So soon only, not yet.
There you go.
Which, yeah, some of you know what that spells.
And I guess an IP-based lens is just not right around the corner.
Hey, if you can prove to us that we need it, we'll do it.
There you go.